diligent to present yourself approved unto God, a worker who does not need to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. 2 Timothy 2:15. Today on Spotlight on the Word, we are going to discuss a very brief but detailed concept: Bible dispensations. What at all is dispensation? Dispensation simply means a divinely appointed time, period, or age. Originating from the Greek word oikonomia, has been rendered four times in the New Testament. In 1 Corinthians chapter 9, the verse number 17, in Ephesians chapter 1, the verse number 10, Ephesians chapter 3, the verse number 2, and in Colossians chapter 1, the verse number 25. In the span of man's life upon earth, there has been three major dispensations that God has been dealing with man. In popular usage, the word dispensation often refers to a period of time. In Bible parlance, it frequently refers to the many epochs of time in which God has operated in implementing the plan of salvation. However, there is a principle that has been consistent in all these dispensations. That is, whenever God was on a covenant with man, that man was able to fulfill the covenant, there were blessings that were due man. But when man was not able to fulfill the covenant, there were curses that were attached to the covenant. And so the covenant had to come to an end. And so the Hebrew writer records in Hebrews chapter 1, the verse number 1 to the verse number 2, that God, who at various times and in various ways spoke in time past to the fathers by the prophet, has in these last days spoken to us by his Son, whom he has appointed heir over all things, whom he also made the worlds. We are going to study three major dispensations that God has dealt with man, namely the patriarchal age, the Mosaical age, and the Christian age. The patriarchal dispensation. The word patriarch simply means the father of a family. In this type of dispensation, God spoke to man through certain elect prophets, and so worship was administered by the fathers of the family. And so when God wanted to communicate to a certain family, he communicated through prophecies, through dreams, through visions to a certain elect prophet who in turn would communicate what God intends for the family to hear. And so we see many patriarchs that the Bible records. We see in Genesis chapter 2, the patriarch Adam, that when God went on a covenant with Adam, that Adam could eat of every tree in the Garden of Eden except the tree of knowledge of good and evil. When Adam was not able to fulfill this covenant, the covenant had to come to an end. In Genesis chapter 6, the verse number 14 to the verse number 17, we see another patriarch, Noah, who God went on a covenant with to build an ark. When Noah was able to fulfill the covenant came to an end and Noah was blessed. In Genesis chapter 12 also we see another patriarch named Abraham. Abraham offered a sacrifice to God, and as a result, Abraham was blessed in turn. And so we can see that in the patriarchal age, whenever God was in a covenant with one patriarch, it wasn't necessarily the same covenant that God went on with another patriarch. And so the covenant with Adam was different from that of Noah and also different from that of Abraham. Now, in Genesis chapter 12, the verse number 2 to the verse number 3, God made a certain promise to the patriarch Abraham that out of his seeds that many nations will be brought forth. Now, many years after this, the grandson of Abraham, Jacob, wrestled or had an encounter with an angel in Genesis chapter 32, the verse number 24 to the verse number 32. In the verse number 26, upon the wrestle with the angel, Jacob asked to be blessed by the angel. And so in the verse number 28, the angel changed the name of Jacob to Israel. And so when Jacob had his 12 sons, that is Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Asher, Gad, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, and Benjamin, there was one prominent one that Jacob loved so much. And who was that? That was the man Joseph. Joseph, being sold into captivity, later on became a prominent man in Egypt. I am very much sure that you are so much aware of this story, and so we wouldn't go into details that much. But the Bible records that in Exodus chapter 1, the verse number 8, there was a time that a certain king came who did not know the precepts or the covenant that Joseph had gone with the earlier king. And so he decided to take captives of the people of Israel. And so God wanted to redeem these people from bondage, and so had to send the man Moses to redeem his people from the captivity in Egypt. Later on the mountain Sinai, God gave his commands or his precepts to Moses to give to the people of Israel. And so on the mountain Sinai, God went on a covenant with the people of Israel. And so in Exodus chapter 20, we see that God gave his written laws to the people of Israel. In Exodus chapter 34, the verse number 27, we see God commanding Moses to write down certain laws so that he could give to the people of Israel. But these laws were not only to be heard. In Deuteronomy chapter 6, the verse number 6 to the verse number 9, the Bible records that it was supposed to be at the forefront of every Israelite's mind. Now, there was a condition that was attached to this law. In Exodus chapter 19, the verse number 5 to the verse number 6, the Bible records that this law was not just given, but was given on a condition. Unlike the patriarchal age when these laws were just spoken through prophecies, through visions, through dreams, the Mosaical law was a written form of worship. Then again, man was not able to fulfill this covenant, and so the covenant had to come to an end. Upon the death of the testator, Jesus Christ, there was a new dispensation that was set in place. And so we see that from the book of Acts chapter 2 to the coming of Jesus Christ, there is a new set of dispensation that has been set in place. A classical example to explain the concept of dispensation can be seen in the book of Matthew chapter 17, where there were three people, prominent people that the Bible records of. That is the man Elijah, Moses, and then Jesus Christ. Elijah being a representative of the patriarchal age, Moses representing the Mosaical, and then Jesus Christ representing the Christian age. But in Matthew chapter 17, verse number 5, the Bible records that this is my son in whom I am well pleased. A time is coming, and now is, when the true worshippers will worship God in truth and in spirit. Are you aware that many false teachings, many false doctrines that have sprouted out from Christianity is as a result of people not being able to rightly divide the word of truth? And so if you would want to gain salvation for your soul, there is the need for you to rightly divide the word of truth. There is the need for you to understand that there are certain dispensations that God has lived with man. In Titus chapter 2, the verse number 11, the Bible recalls that the grace of God that brings salvation has appeared to all men. And so you and I, who were once alienated from the scheme of redemption, have also been brought in. In conclusion, it can be said that the three dispensations can be briefly stated as: the patriarchal age is an age that represents the nuclear family system, where you have the father, the mother, and the children. The Mosaical age is also the extended family system, whereby it consists of many parents and then many children also. And then the Christian dispensation is a cluster of extended families, whereby you have many nations being involved. And so initially that you and I were not part of the scheme of redemption. Initially that was only the Jews that were God's people. Now you and I have also gained salvation for our souls. But this salvation that we have gained, we need to work towards it. We need to look through the scriptures to see what God intends for you and I. How shall we escape if we neglect so great a salvation? God bless.
Give me the Bible, sorrow.